This is lesson 14, part 3. We're going to finish up our work with time signatures.
We are going to go ahead and practice drawing our note and rest value pyramids together one more time. So remember that we will start with our longest note value, which is a whole note represented by an open note head. So whole note, and then we'll draw the rest equivalent. The rest will look like a heavy hat, which will hang from line 4, okay? Then we can take that whole note or whole rest and split it into 2 equal parts. On the note side, we'll represent that with a open note head again, which is one notation element added, a stem. And these will be half notes because they're worth half the value or half the duration of a whole note. And we have a rest equivalent, which is the lighter hat, which will sit on line 3. And that will also be half the value of a whole rest. We can take those half notes or half rests and we can split them into 2 equal parts. For the note side, we'll just fill in that note head. So that's the notation element we add. And we will call these quarter notes because they will have a quarter of the value or a quarter of the duration of a whole note. And we will represent that on the rest side. A silence would be represented with a Z with that little tail. We can take each of those quarter notes or rests and we can split them into 2 equal parts. And we represent that with what looks like a quarter note but with an added flag. And we can also take those 2 flags and connect them with what we call a beam in either 2s or 3s or 4s or sometimes even 6s. But there's only one beam or one flag, and we call these eighth notes because they are worth just an eighth of the value or an eighth of the duration of a whole note. There's a rest equivalent, which is a silence equivalent, and we represent that with this swoopy little 7. Okay, and then we can take each of those eighth notes. We can split them into 2 equal parts as well. Again, for the notes, what looks like eighth notes, but with 2 flags. Same filled in note head. And very, very often we see these beam together, so the flags are just connected like this. And again, it can be in various groups, often in 4s, but doesn't have to be. Like that. And I'll draw one more set. And the rest equivalent, the silence equivalent of these would be a swoopy 7 with 2 flags. So I'll just draw 4 of those. And we would call these 16th notes or rests because they're worth just a 16th of the duration or time as a whole note or whole rest.
Remember that beat is a recurring pulse in music, and just like a second hand on a clock, it is predictable and it is independent of anything else going on around it. Rhythm is going to be represented by the note and rest values that we see on a page of music that will tell us when to start and stop notes or pitches and silences. And it is dependent on a pulse to be fully realized or performed. So for the time being, remember that when we practice saying different rhythms, we're going to be using the Gordon rhythm syllables. And for a single beat note, we'll say do. For a 2-beat note, we'll just hold that for 2 counts, do. And for a 3-beat note, we'll hold that for 3 counts, do. For half-beat notes, we're going to usually group them in 2s. And the first note we will say do for, the second one day, and that'll come exactly halfway through the beat. So do day, do day, do day, do day. Again, today we're going to practice some examples where we put an external beat into our bodies, into our hands. We're going to try and internalize that beat, and then we're going to say various rhythms with our mouth. So we're going to set the metronome at 80 beats per minute today, and we're going to be grouping beats into 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, ready, clap. And now we're going to say 4 2-beat notes. 1, 2, ready, go. Do, 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 do. Do it again. Ready, go. Do, 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 do. We're going to keep the same pulse of metronome at 80 beats per minute, and beats are going to be grouped into 4s, which would mean in that time signature that one measure would have 4 beats in it, because one measure is always comprised of one group of beats. So we're going to be doing a 1-beat note followed by a 1-beat rest, and we're going to do that 4 times. So a 1-beat note followed by a 1-beat rest. Remember, the pulse continues through the silence. Our mouth will be silent, but our hands will continue to clap the pulse. So 1, 2, ready, clap. 1-beat note followed by 1-beat rest, repeating that 4 times. 1, 2, ready, go. Do, 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 do. And do that again. 2, ready, go. Do, 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 do. For our final example, we're going to do our half-beat notes, 1 pair of half-beat notes, which is do, day, followed by a 1-beat note. And we're going to do that pattern 4 times. So again, metronome at 80, grouping beats into 4s. So each measure would contain 4 beats. The downbeat is always emphasized. Clap the beat first. 2, ready, clap. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So a pair of half-beat notes followed by a 1-beat note, and repeat that pattern 4 times. 1, 2, ready, go. Do, day, do, do, day, do, do, day, do, do, day, do. Do that again. Ready, go. Do, day, do, do, day, do, do, day, do, do, day, do. Remember that the time signature is chosen by the composer, and it will be found at the leftmost side of the staff. It'll be to the right of the clef sign. Remember that the time signature will tell us 2 very important bits of decoding information. So the top number will tell us how many beats there are in a measure, or how the beats will be grouped throughout that piece or throughout that section of the piece. The bottom number will tell us which note value the composer has designated to be the beat or pulse note. So which note value should be equal to 1 beat.
We are returning to Unit 2, which is our rhythm unit, Lesson 6 on time signatures, and we should be finishing up today. You'll notice I've taken the liberty of drawing the note and rest value pyramids so that I'll have that to work with when it's time to decode our information. Don't hesitate to use tools like that, especially for the first while, as we really have to consciously decode things at first. All right, so it says on the staff below, 1 measure has too many beats. Circle the measure with too many beats. All right, so first of all, let's just take a look at our time signature, which is right here to the right of the clef sign. We would read that as 3/4 time, or we could say the time signature is 3/4. And the top number tells us how many beats per measure. So we know there will be 3 beats per measure. So the composer has chosen to group beats into 3s. And then the bottom number will tell us what kind of note should be the beat or pulse note. So remember, we can think of that bottom number as the denominator of a fraction, and that will help us remember that we're saying a quarter note equals 1 beat, and just remembering that that'll look like a filled in note head with a stem, right? All right, so first of all, before we start adding up beats, let's just return to our note pyramid here, note value pyramid. And now we can assign specific beat values. So a quarter note and a quarter rest will get 1 beat. A half note and a half rest will get 2 beats. A whole note or a whole rest will get 4 beats. And an eighth note or an eighth rest will get just half a beat. All right, so we're turning back up here now. We have a half note, first of all. So a half note will get 2 beats plus 1 beat for a quarter note. So that equals a total of 3. So we're good to go. That measure is fine. So a quarter note is worth 1. A quarter rest is worth 1. A quarter note is worth 1. So we're also good there. 3 beats. A half note is worth 2. 2 eighth notes together, that's a half plus a half. So those together will equal 1. Okay. And then one more. Uh-oh. So this measure has 4 beats. Okay. So this measure definitely has too many beats. I'm going to go ahead and circle that. Let's finish up with our last measure here. We have a half note, which gets 2 beats, plus a quarter note, which gets 1 beat. So that one is also fine, and that's going to equal 3 beats as well. On the staff below, one measure doesn't have enough beats. Circle that measure. So again, take the time to go through and look at our time signature, 4/4 time, or we could say the time signature is 4/4. So the top number tells us that there are 4 beats per measure, or that the beats are grouped into groups of 4. And then the bottom number tells us, bottom of a fraction, denominator of a fraction, that a quarter note equals 1 beat. Looking at our note value and rest value pyramids, a quarter note and a quarter rest will each get 1 beat. A half note and a half rest will get 2 beats. A whole note and a whole rest will get 4 beats. And an eighth note and an eighth rest will get half a beat each. So now we can do our math again. So a half note will get 2 beats. Quarter note 1, quarter note 1. So we have a total of 4. Looking good there. Then we have a half note, 2 beats. We have a half rest, and remember we know that because it's a lighter hat that's sitting on line 3, so it's just 2 beats. That's also worth 4 total. Good to go so far. Now we have 3 sets of eighth note, 3 pairs of eighth notes. So each of these is going to be worth 1 beat each. So 1 plus 1 for both of them together, plus 1, you know what though? Even though there's 6 note values in that measure, so many, it's still only worth 3. So that's actually going to be our culprit right there. That's our measure. That's not worth enough. And then we have 1 whole note. And even though it's only 1 note value, it's worth 4 beats all by itself. So it's held for 4 beats. Our last question says, write the correct time signature in the box for each of the following examples. I'm not nuts on this question. It's more of a theory question, but we're just going to approach it by looking at the most frequently used note value. So we see a whole lot of quarter notes and quarter rests in this example. So we're going to go ahead and say that the quarter note is our beat. So we'll put a 4 on the bottom of the time signature. And we can just literally count up those quarter note beats in one measure, and we'll have our time signature because we know that each of the measures will contain the same number of beats. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, a total of 4. So we're going to say this is 4 beats per measure. Quarter note gets a beat. This is 4/4 time. Same strategy for the example below. The whole lot of eighth notes and eighth rests in this. So we're going to go ahead and say that that is going to be our beat or pulse note value. We'll put that an 8 on the bottom of the time signature. And then we're again going to just take one measure and count up those eighth note beats. Add them up. And we'll see there are a total of 6 eighth note beats in each measure. So 6/8 time would be a good time signature for this example.